Good afternoon, everyone. It's David Schlotthauer here with another detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Monday, June the 10th, 2024. Now to start off this video, here's a look at the latest 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. And once again, there is no chances of any tropical storm, depression, or hurricane over the next week, which is good news if you're doing any traveling to the deep tropics for vacation. It looks all set in stone. Well, good news. Green lights, no red lights at all. And that's what we like to hear. In the Eastern Pacific, same thing. There is no sort of chances of any tropical storm, depression, or hurricane to form in this basin as well. So for right now, the two basins are looking quiet. Another product that I like to look at is the GOES 16 True Color Visible Satellite Imagery from tropicaltidbits.com at Dr. Levi Cowan's website. Link in the description below this video. And as we can see, we have been mentioning this already for nearly a week now, for the Central American gyre to generate a lot of heavy rain and some flooding over portions of Cuba as well as Florida. We can see what the winds are doing down here. See how they're coming in out of the east and they curve up and then they kind of curve around here. So we're beginning to get the signs of what appears to be a Central American gyre going. And this really helps to kind of get thunderstorms going. This allows a lot of moisture to bundle up here and a lot of upward motion to support a lot of heavy rainfall and showers and thunderstorms. And then of course we have this upper level trough that is going to be playing a game role in how much rainfall can Florida get out of this. But otherwise, rest of the Atlantic in the main development region looking pretty good right now due to some Saharan dust and some dry air aloft and some wind shear that's not allowing things to develop at all. So when we take a look at the latest European model, clearly stating that how much rainfall is going to be a huge problem for central and southern Florida. We take a look at the model, we do have a lot of this green. That's the thunderstorms that we looked at on satellite imagery. This is going to be ushering northward and then eventually to the northeast, aided by a lot of isotropic lift in the upper parts of the atmosphere streaming across the southeastern U.S. And usually the ending result is when we get a configuration with this type of pattern, we get a ridge here, and then we get a low pressure such as the monsoon gyre off the side of the screen here. We get this alleyway where the moisture is able to escape freely to the north. And the ending result is a lot of rain for many days to come for central and southern Florida. So going forward, this is for tomorrow morning and tomorrow early afternoon. Again, dark greens indicate a lot of heavy rainfall rates here, possibly 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch an hour at times. Sticky, muggy, kind of soupy out there. Not a day to do anything outdoors. When we go forward into Wednesday morning, still raining down here, perhaps. So again, this is nearly 2 days. That's a 2-day forecast, and it's really going to stall out here. Heavy rain, strong winds at times, maybe some severe weather as well. Something that you don't typically see with these type of systems. But this is going to be one of those cases where we do see some severe weather. And out to day 3 for Thursday morning, we're still dealing with lots of rainfall and flood concerns, especially for southern Florida. And this moisture just kind of hangs all around at least over the next 5 days. So when we do take a look at the rainfall totals, quite a bit of moisture to be spread out or to be compacted in a 5-day forecast. So some portions of Florida up here, you might see only 1/10 of an inch, maybe 1/4 to 1/2 an inch, depending on what model you use, going to give you different outputs. But generally, we're looking at between 1/10 to 1/4 to maybe 1/2 an inch up here in the northern end of Florida. But down here to the south is where we are looking at quite a bit of moisture, especially for Cape Coral down here, or Cape Coral, as well as just south of Tampa, Florida. This is really a big problem. Maybe 1 foot of rainfall over a 5-day period. Again, I just said that, up to 1 foot in some of these areas in the purple colors. It's a lot of moisture in a swampy land of Florida, in the flatlands here. And that's why there is going to be a big threat, possibly a moderate or even a high risk for heavy rain and flood concerns in later outlooks from the Weather Prediction Center. In fact, the Weather Prediction Center for day 2 does have a slight risk for heavy tropical rainfall down there for the southern half of Florida. Even for day 3, including Cape Coral as well as, or Cape Coral, Fort Lauderdale, Port St. Lucie, as well as Palm Bay, this is not it. Day 4 also includes a slight risk. All the way into day 5, we have a slight risk. Now, just because it's a slight risk for heavy rainfall right now does not mean it's going to stay that way. There are early indications this is going to probably be upgraded to at least a moderate risk for at least 1 or 2 of these days that are in the slight risk areas, especially over if you're in Lake Okeechobee to the south where we have the deeper moisture ascent. We're probably going to have moderate to even perhaps high risk events of flooding from time to time throughout the 5-day period. So with that being said, there is also agreement from the GFS model, the American model, that indicates pretty much the similar outcome with what the Euro is showing. Again, a lot of rainfall over Florida. If we've kind of pull this through with each frame, you can see how there's a lot of rainfall down here. Now, GFS more southerly than the Euro, indicating more heavier rain will likely fall in the southernmost portion of Florida, whereas the Euro has it more over central and southern Florida combined. So there's a little bit of slight disagreement here. But either way, the ending result is this fetch of moisture. If we actually take a look at the deep layer moisture plot, showing you with what we're looking at here, you can see this moisture just kind of hanging around each and every day for the next 5 days. And eventually when the pattern changes, when a new ridge develops on top of this monsoon gyre, then the pattern might shift more towards a drier pattern for Florida briefly before maybe more chances of rain increase thereafter. But other than that, the tropics looking pretty quiet in the deep tropics of the Caribbean, as well as the leeward windward islands, including Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, other than that fetch of moisture that Florida is going to be getting. So back to the European model, here's a look at the low-level spin in the atmosphere. That's these blue contours looking at this from weathermodels.com, link in the description. And when we go forward in time, we can see how the pattern looks pretty quiet. Now, something that does pop my eye here is in a couple of days, that area of enhanced showers and thunderstorms might become something else once it emerges on the other side of Florida. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty amongst how this is all going to develop, because at the end of all of this, this is a frontal boundary, what we call an isotropic tropical boundary that sets up when we have converging winds. So we have trade winds doing this in the low levels, and we get winds kind of swinging on the backside within this monsoon trough or the Central American gyre. We have a weak ridge of high pressure over here off the southwestern Atlantic portion. And so at the end of all of this, sometimes what ends up happening is we get some vorticity bundlations, and if it's successful under a favorable environment, we can get something that develops. So in this case, we try to get something developing on the European model. So this is day 2 for Wednesday morning. Let's go into day 3. Just after day 3, that gets a little bit more better organized, and by the time we go into just beyond 5 days, we get our first name storm. Now, what I just said is our first name storm. That's just based on looking at the European model. But as you know, again, it's really hard to decipher if this is going to happen. It requires some vorticity to be strong enough to be able to close off once it passes Florida. No, Florida's not going to get a tropical depression or a tropical storm, just a lot of heavy rain and flooding. But I'm just talking about areas off the coast over the open waters here of the Atlantic. No land areas are impacted. No people should be hurt. Only shipping interests are to be worried about this little system. And then after that, it becomes a more bona fide extratropical or subtropical system once it gets over to the Newfoundland and the Labrador of Canada. The US GFS model, the American model, has something entirely different on its scenario on how it illustrates and simulates on what might happen with that same system. So again, same time frame. This is Monday afternoon into Tuesday morning, and as we can see, same thing, vorticity, low-level spin in the atmosphere at 5,000 feet. That's the color shading. The wind barbs are your wind direction. I explained this pretty well in a couple of videos ago. But we can see here in about 4 days, the GFS really not showing anything coming together other than just a little bit of spin here that tries to concentrate, but doesn't successfully do so versus what the European model shows. And entirely, When we look at the European model, our 12Z run is running a little bit behind, so we'll have to wait for that. But just believe me, the GFS is very different with its outcome of what that's going to end up doing in about 138 hours versus the European model. The Canadian model also has a different scenario with what the European has. More of a broader circulation entangled with this isotropic front that is going to propagate its way across the Atlantic with this deep layer ridge. So 3 different models have 3 different scenarios. And again, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And that's why the National Hurricane Center has no area of interest or anything to watch for in the next 7 days within this monsoonal gyre that develops. Now, beyond that, there's a lot of uncertainty on what happens on the GFS model. But right now, at the moment, there is, oh wait, now this is not the GFS, my bad. So there is no indications of any more tropical formation, at least in the next 10 days, which is good. So it looks like this Central American gyre might fall apart a little bit. So a little bit of shenanigans over the next 3 to 7 days, perhaps, and then things kind of wind down a little bit as the atmosphere becomes more unfavorable for tropical development. Now that we talked about the tropics, especially for the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the southwestern Western Atlantic, for any possible outcome of tropical formation in the next 7 to 10 days, we're going to be looking at the sea surface temperatures across the Atlantic. I always like looking at these. Since we skipped yesterday, it's a good idea since it's kind of the second day of the first of the week. You know, the beginning of the week is Sunday. Today's the second day of that. We're looking at sea surface temperatures, and they have still warmed up pretty quickly. We are now starting to see 80-degree Fahrenheit waters reaching as far north as 40 degrees north in latitude. So that means the Atlantic here is really warming up at a very rapid rate. And in fact, we are seeing already historic record-breaking sea surface temperatures for the time of the year that we're in. It's only June the 10th, and we're already seeing sea surface temperatures that match that to early September, late August timeframe. So what I'm saying here is the Atlantic is pretty much all locked and loaded, ready to go for intense, long-tracked hurricanes later this season, say towards late October or late August into September. Sea surface temperature anomalies, definitely a huge problem out there. We discussed this a couple of videos ago, or in last video, a couple of days ago, I should say. Sea surface temperatures in the deep tropics and in the subtropics are running about 2 to almost 4 degrees Celsius above average right now. That is very significant. We're seeing really warm sea surface temperatures right around 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 degrees Celsius in the Gulf of Mexico and about 1 to 2 degrees Celsius in the deep tropics of the Caribbean. And again, a very warm look to the AMO, a positive AMO. The Atlantic Mercadial Oscillation is what we call, or decadial, something like that, oscillation, where we get the warm Iberian current coming all the way down into the deep tropics. And when we get these tropical waves coming off of Africa from the Sahel region, the West African monsoon jet, things are sure to fly in August and September. So upper ocean heat content is also very significant. We talked about this in last video in episode 12, how we have very warm or very high upper ocean heat content, still a thing this day on the 10th of June, where we have record-breaking upper ocean heat content, something that we have not seen in satellite modern era. In fact, some of the upper ocean heat content right now is already exceeding 170 kilojoules per centimeter squared, which is very significant, something that we have not seen at all this early in the season. Now, of course, I mentioned this in my videos before. Upper ocean heat content does not give hurricanes, but it gives hurricane energy. So if the background state is favorable, we get upward motion, we have enough moisture, we have very little wind shear in the atmosphere. Upper ocean heat content is octane fuel gasoline for intense, violent hurricanes as they propagate across the Atlantic. During the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season, usually when the Cape Verde season gets going, when these tropical waves come off of Africa and they run into a very favorable environment. This time of the year, we typically don't see that happen because the background state is not there yet in its base state or its interseasonal base state to give rise to tropical cyclone formation. All right, so with that being said, here's a look at the Atlantic hurricane and tropical storm activity climatology. I want you all to please understand that it is June. It is not September, okay? And a lot of you, again, in my last video have left comments. This is going to be a bust. This is going to be a inactive hurricane season. That is completely wrong. And please, I would highly emphasize not make predictions based on where we are at now. Seasons can start off very slow. We've seen those before, and they end very active, especially once we get into August and September. So where we're at right now is we're roughly here. So I'm going to point my arrow. We're kind of on another little downscale of climatology here for a more inactive period in the Atlantic. So what I'm telling you here now is this is supposed to happen. We're not supposed to have major hurricanes or hurricanes this time of the year. So again, before you forecast and be like, oh, we're going to only see 5 to 10 named storms this year. We might, but it is very unlikely because the sea surface temperature base state, the climatology, La Nina developing really allows for a very busy season to evolve. And that's exactly where we're headed this year. It's very unfortunate, folks, that we have to deal with something like this. But this is what happens in a warming climate. So going forward, usually in July is a very quiet month. We're not really into mid-August is when activity really starts getting going. It's between mid-August and mid-October, those 2 months. So again, from mid-August to September is 1 month, mid-September into mid-October is 2 months. So that 30 to 60, about 60 to 90 day period is when the Atlantic is on fire with activity, with numerous hurricanes, some of which are strong to intense and long tracked. And that usually doesn't develop again until mid-August to late August, right around the 20th and beyond. If that wasn't very helpful, this is from the National Hurricane Center on the average of a progression of the Atlantic hurricane season. So we typically do not average our first named storm until June the 20th, and our first hurricane does not average up until August the 11th. So really, we are very early, folks. This is the 10th day of the Atlantic hurricane season. I know some of you are like, come on, climatology, meteorologists are predicting a hyperactive season. Where in the heck is it? Right? This is a different year than what we had in 2020, then 2005, right? Believe me, we can make up very quickly. All we need is several hurricanes all at once or named storms, and then things can turn the corner very quickly. Be aware. Calm before the storm. Never say never until, like, say, October. We don't average our first major hurricane until September 1st. For reference, yeah, not until September 1st. That's literally almost autumn is when we get our first major hurricane. So my point here being is we have a long way to go, all right? And again, just because we may be behind than 2020 and 2005 does not mean that, oh, this is going to be a bust, David. Don't worry about it. Believe me, we are going to have a hyperactive season. I'm very confident in that. A lot of agencies are still predicting that is going to happen. And please believe me. But otherwise, if you did enjoy today's detailed tropical weather outlook and discussion for Monday, June the 10th, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the like button, and share this video with their family and friends on social media. As always, I'll be back with you more in the tropics tomorrow.